Earlier today, Prime Minister Modi sent a message of unity. He said that the enemy is trying to destabilize India, but the country will fight these threats together.
साथियों, जब दुश्मन भारत को अस्थिर करने की साजिश करता है, जब आतंकी हमला करता है, तो उनका एक मकसद ये भी होता है कि हमारी प्रगति रुक जाए, हमारी गति रुक जाए, हमारा देश थम जाए। उनके इस मकसद के सामने हर भारतीय को दीवान बनकर के, चट्टान बनकर के खड़ा होना है। उन्हें दिखाना है कि न ये देश रुकेगा, न देश की प्रगति थमेगी। पूरा देश आज एक है और हमारे जवानों के साथ खड़ा है। दुनिया हमारे कलेक्टिव विल को देख रही है। हमारी सेनाओं के सामर्थ्य पर हमें भरोसा है और इसलिए बहुत आवश्यक है कि कुछ भी ऐसा न हो जिससे उनके मनोबल पर आंच आए या हमारे दुश्मनों को हमारे पर उंगली उठाने का मौका मिल जाए।
Soon after the events of Wednesday, Imran Khan said this in an address to the nation.
मेरा सवाल ये है हिंदुस्तान हुकूमत से कि क्या जो हथियार आपके पास है और हमारे पास है, क्या हम मिसकैलकुलेशन अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं? क्या हमें इस वक्त सोचना नहीं चाहिए कि ये अगर यहां से एस्केलेट होती है तो ये किधर जाएगी? ना मेरे कंट्रोल में होगी, ना नरेंद्र मोदी के कंट्रोल में होगी। इसलिए मैं फिर से आपको दावत देता हूं।
That statement was both an offer and a warning. Since taking power, the Pakistani Prime Minister has repeatedly sought a dialogue with the Indian government, but this time he chose to remind the world about Pakistan's nuclear capabilities. Pakistan, in fact, has a history of touting its nuclear weapons to attract international attention, and we've been speaking to experts here on Wion who say that India did right to call Pakistan's bluff.
That be decoupled, that Pakistan understands that they cannot immunize their terrorists that they're using as an element of their foreign policy, immunize that tactic simply by saying, well, we have nuclear weapons, so you can't, India can't defend itself against these attacks. I think that's the real issue.
This was a threat disguised as an offer of peace, and India issued a strong response. Delhi summoned the acting High Commissioner of Pakistan and lodged a strong protest. The statement said that Pakistan had engaged in an unprovoked act of aggression. Since Pakistani jets had targeted Indian military posts, India said that it reserves the right to take firm action to protect itself. Escalating tensions would have been a tough choice to make for Pakistan. Its economy, remember, is in a shambles. The defense capabilities are just not enough to engage India militarily. They're hopelessly outmatched. By releasing this Indian Air Force pilot, Islamabad is basically looking for a way out. It's a quiet way to de-escalate. It's a wise decision, we say, but it's unlikely that Indian government will cut back on the pressure it has been able to create on Pakistan. And Union Ministers Arun Jaitley and Ravi Shankar Prasad addressing the press. Let's listen in right now.
1954. ये ऑर्डर का वो पार्ट है जो रिजर्वेशंस के साथ डील करता है, और ये रिजर्वेशंस वाला प्रावधान अभी तक 1993 का पारित हुआ, जो 97th कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अमेंडमेंट था आर्टिकल 16 के संबंध में, और उसके बाद वाले कुछ ऐसे प्रावधान जो जम्मू कश्मीर के अंदर लागू नहीं किए गए। आज मंत्रिपरिषद ने माननीय राज्यपाल जी की स्वीकृति के साथ उनको जम्मू और कश्मीर में लागू करने का निर्णय।
The last few days have served as a reminder of how even a security situation, a complicated and tense situation like this one, can also be used for politics. The BJP's Karnataka President, B.S. Yediyurappa's statement was a shocker. The former Chief Minister of Karnataka said that the Pulwama airstrikes would be would lead the BJP to victory in the state in the upcoming general election. As deserved, that statement got panned by the opposition. Meanwhile, 21 opposition parties expressed anguish over the ruling party's blatant politicization, as they called it, of the sacrifice of the Indian armed forces.
Meeting of leaders of 21 political parties condemned the dastardly Pulwama terror attack by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists of Jaish-e-Mohammed on 14th February 2019. The meeting paid homage to our martyrs and expressed solidarity with our armed forces in crushing the menace of terrorism.
Some of these opposition leaders said that national security must transcend narrow political considerations. We agree. But then many in opposition parties were guilty of the same crime.
At 3:10, the Pulwama terror attack happened. ANI reflected that at 3:15. I saw it on television channels. And what was Prime Minister doing? Prime Minister was doing a multi-camera film shooting in Jim Corbett Park at Nainital. What was Prime Minister doing? He was roaming around in boats, getting himself filmed.
In fact, soon after the Pulwama attacks, the same leader said that these attacks were a testimony of the government's utter failure on national security. The comments came on the same day as these attacks took place, even before the government had a chance to assess the issue in its totality. It's understandable that it is election season and there are vote banks to cater to, but trying to make cheap political gains out of a conflict like this reflects poorly upon all parties involved. While most of these spoke in one voice, some stray voices across the political spectrum sparred to gain mileage, and that should be noted, like everything else is in political season. Now, much ado about nothing is one way to summarize the Trump-Kim summit in Hanoi. In simple words, the summit ended without any agreement. The two sides were far apart on key issues: disarmament of nuclear weapons and relief from sanctions. Donald Trump just walked away from it, and the reason: he cannot accept North Korea's demands to lift all U.S. sanctions.
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that. They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that. So we continue to work, and we'll see, but we had to walk away from that particular suggestion. We had to walk away from that.
Trump still says that the talks were productive and that Kim Jong-un is quite a character and a guy. But Trump did not come all the way to Vietnam to give a certificate to the North Korean dictator, did he?
Left, we spent pretty much all day with Kim Jong-un, who is he's quite a guy and quite a character, and I think our relationship is very strong. But at this time, we had some options, and at this time we decided not to do any of the options, and we'll see where that goes. But it was a very interesting 2 days, and I think actually it was a very productive 2 days, but sometimes you have to walk.
So where does this lead to? There's no indication that the two leaders will sit for another summit, but Donald Trump is in no rush to strike a deal, it seems. He wants to strike the right deal, and there is no clarity on what this so-called right deal is. North Korea wants to escape the sanctions, and they have promised to denuclearize, promises that the country has not kept for decades. And Donald Trump's statement after the abrupt end to the talks is more ambiguous than the summit itself.
Can you just give us a little more detail? Did you get into the question of actually dismantling the Yongbyon complex?
Yes, absolutely.
And does he seem willing ultimately to take all of that out?
Sure, totally.
He does. He just wants all the sanctions off first.
He would do that, but he wants the sanctions for that. And as you know, there's plenty left after that.
North Korea is not pessimistic, though, and Kim Jong-un says that he has a feeling that good results will come out soon. So is this meeting all about a hunch for positive relationships, we ask?
Well, it's too early to tell. But I wouldn't say that I'm pessimistic. But from what I feel right now, I do have a feeling that good results would come out.
South Korea, China and other countries for whom these talks mean a lot are happy that the two leaders at least came together. Talks are progressive is the general assessment. But what exactly progressed is anybody's guess.
트럼프 대통령과 김정은 국무위원장이 오늘 정상회담에서 완전한 합의에 이르지 못한 점은 아쉽게 생각합니다.
就中方而言，我想说呢，实际上大家都能看到，在过去1年多来，朝鲜半岛局势出现了重大的转机。那么半岛问题重新回到了政治解决的正确轨道，应当说这一成果来之不易，值得珍惜。
The two leaders have tried to use these talks to further their political mileage. Further details are awaited as to why the talks ended even before the scheduled lunch. So is it back to square one? After all, the hype about peace in the Korean peninsula has not been lived up to. US wants North Korea to give up all its nuclear weapons to get relief from sanctions. North Korea wants full relief from sanctions to end its nuclear program. It's a bit of a vicious cycle. It's a classic case of who blinks first, and nobody did that in Vietnam. It feels more like the normal service will resume on North Korea, and that's such a shame, we say. The nuclear summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un may have ended without an agreement, but the Vietnamese people were tremendously excited. They took pride in their country being the venue of this iconic meeting. Here's a report.
Hanoi residents welcomed US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as they took pride in their home city being the venue of the historic event. The streets were lined with North Korean and US flags featuring the iconic handshake.
Hà Nội là vai trò cầu nối tất nhiên rất lớn với hai nước này ạ. Em hy vọng mối quan hệ này sẽ tốt đẹp hơn rất là nhiều ạ sau cuộc hội nghị này ạ.
Việt Nam chúng tôi là một đất nước mà yêu chuộng hòa bình, Hà Nội là một thành phố rất là yêu chuộng hòa bình, và nhân cái việc tổ chức cái sự kiện lần này ấy, có sự bắt tay ngồi xuống đàm phán giữa hai ông Kim Jong-un và Donald Trump.
Vietnamese people were caught up in the excitement of the summit and were just hoping for a glimpse of the two leaders.
Nhân dân Việt Nam và riêng bản thân cá nhân tôi là rất phấn khởi, bởi vì trước hết là được đón một cái tổng thống của tổng thống và Mỹ và ông Kim.
Và em cũng khá là hồi hộp để chờ xem hai cái vị gọi là nguyên thủ quốc gia khá là nổi tiếng trên thế giới. Một người là về vấn đề kinh tế cũng như chính sách, còn một người thì em nghĩ nổi tiếng hơn hết là về vấn đề trong quân sự cũng như là hạt nhân.
Artists put up paintings of the two leaders showing their support and admiration for them.
Tôi rất muốn là Tổng thống Donald Trump và Kim Jong-un nếu mà có điều kiện ghé thăm trường vẽ của tôi và xem tranh tôi sẽ mời hai tổng thống đi cà phê.
Mặc dù ông Donald Trump bị rất nhiều dư luận và hay gọi là fake news nói về ông ấy những từ rất là xấu xí, những từ bệnh hoạn, khùng điên, rồi dâm dục, rồi vân vân, rất là từ xấu. Nhưng mà với tôi nghĩ rằng là
While some chose to paint the iconic leaders, others took it a step further. The famous Kim Jong-un and Trump impersonators made a fancy appearance for the crowds. Trump and Kim became the latest style icons too, as residents of Hanoi were getting haircuts to look like their favorite leader.
Vì tôi thích kiểu tóc của ông Donald Trump nên tôi mới làm tóc kiểu ông Donald Trump.
Từ khi cháu cắt kiểu tóc này, các bạn nhìn thấy cháu và cháu rất giống ông Kim Jong-un.
Amidst all the excitement and fanfare, Kim Jong-un arrived in Hanoi on the 26th after a 2.5-day journey from Pyongyang. Air Force One carrying Donald Trump touched down in Hanoi the same day. The two leaders held meetings on the 27th and 28th. This summit was supposed to build on their initial historic meeting at Singapore that critics said was more style over substance. But little seems to have come out of this highly anticipated event. Bureau Report, Wion, World is One.
Donald Trump has seen criticism, some would say more than his fair share, bucket loads of it. But even for his standards, his former attorney, Michael Cohen's testimony is nothing short of explosive. Here are some of the words used against the US president: racist, conman, criminal conspirator, white supremacist. The list goes on.
I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Donald Trump's former Attorney General and one-time fixer Michael Cohen's explosive statement is dominating prime time in America. Cohen expanded on Trump's campaign's Russia links.
What's your response to Michael Cohen?
Our negotiations continued for months later during the campaign. Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates. In conversations we had during the campaign, at the same time I was actively negotiating in Russia for him, he would look me in the eye and tell me there's no Russian business, and then go on to lie to the American people by saying the same thing.
And Trump's violation of campaign laws and payment of hush money.
The President of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws.
Cohen even had copies of the checks to support his case. It was a day of high drama before the House Oversight Committee. Cohen once said that he will take the bullet for President Trump. Now he has his guns trained on him. Cohen's account is a detailed public record of Trump's campaign and his Russia links, the two things that mar his presidency. Cohen's account comes as Robert Mueller's probe nears its end. Mueller has been probing the collusion between the Trump campaign team and Russia. U.S. officials say that the Hillary Clinton emails released by WikiLeaks were stolen by Russia to influence the U.S. presidential elections 2016. And then Cohen said this.
Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?"
The former attorney's testimony was on edge-of-the-seats stuff. Cohen spoke of Trump's tax evasion.
What he didn't want was to have an entire group of think tanks that are tax experts run through his tax return and start ripping it to pieces, and then he'll end up in an audit and he'll ultimately have taxable consequences, penalties, and so on.
Trump's attempts to even hide his educational track record.
I'm talking about a man who declares himself brilliant, but directed me to threaten his high school, his colleges, and the college board to never release his grades or SAT scores.
Trump's attempt to threaten others.
How many times did Mr. Trump ask you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf?
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably.
The role of Trump Jr.
That Don Jr. was referring to that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting about dirt on Hillary with the Russian representatives when he walked behind his dad's desk that day. And that Mr. Trump knew that was the meeting Don Jr. was talking about when he said, "That's good, let me know."
Cohen even warned the Republicans.
And I can only warn people, the more people that follow Mr. Trump, as I did blindly, are going to suffer the same consequences that I'm suffering.
For all that Cohen said, Trump had a classic reaction, and so did Republicans.
He only won about 95% instead of 100%. But the fact is there is no collusion, and I call it the witch hunt.
But the testimony has opened a can of worms.
Liar, liar, pants on fire. No one should ever listen to you and give you credibility. It's sad
A sitting president may not face consequences, but risks will escalate for Trump once he ceases to be president, and that could set off unintended consequences. Bureau Report, Wion, World is One.